analysis. So using the same questionnaire on NSSF. Now, let's talk about the mission and core values. And if you look at this question, this is the question I said you have several attributes that are meant to measure one variable. So the variable here is level of satisfaction in as far as mission and core values are concerned. And because there's no specific measure for such, then all these statements are meant to measure or to ascertain the position of the organization in as far as the mission and core values is concerned. So we have things like distribution of NSSF offices, registration process, modes of contribution, and so forth. So how will you go about such a question? And one, because I don't want us to code this one, okay, so I don't want us to code this one because I already have the Excel file. So I think it would be better if I demonstrate to you on how to work with Excel file. So remember we said under data entry, we will split it into two. We said the primary sources part, which is basically the questionnaire, and then we also have the secondary, which is said import an Excel file into So one, this question first is not complicated. It's a single select. What does that mean? In the first attribute, if you are very satisfied, then you're very satisfied. You can't choose very satisfied and then again choose very dissatisfied. In simple terms, it's just a single select question. But now the tricky part is making sense out of the data. So for instance, again, if you decide to be neutral under the registration process, all you have to do is click on neutral. So there's no difference between this question and a question like gender. Okay, so what am I saying? Just observe, and then I will be able also to share the same, and I think you have the same file that I'm talking about. So if you go back to that same folder called download, there is data files. I'm not so sure if just confirm and then you let me know. So go back to that folder called download.
The NSSF contributor XLS file, right?
Yes. Yeah. This time, let's try and import that Excel. Now, assuming you are to so just to make sure we're in the same page. So far, in as far as coding questionnaires, most questions what do you do? As single select and multiple. If you look at how it is responded to, and of course you know how to. Of course, if my audio changes, this place is raining, so let me know how bad I'm doing in case it gets worse.
You're breaking up a bit.
So the second part, yeah, okay. Get the recording. I'm sure in the recordings there's no breaking, so you'll be good to go. But in case it gets worse, then okay. Okay, I was switching between my connection, so hope this one will be a little bit stable. So
I can hear
let's
you.
import the example. So if you go to the SPSS, so go to the SPSS, and then File, Open, File, Open, then Data. So you need to know the location of your file. So what I mean here is, where have you saved your file? Is it in your desktop? Of course, the files are in your desktop. So for me, I will look for the location of my file. So you need to instruct the software on what you want to see. So let's go back. So if you go down here, there's an option of file of type. So what file types do you want to see? So these are the extension that I was mentioning yesterday before we closed at the end. So we said what? If you want to know an Excel file, you need to know the extension for Excel file, which it can either be a CSV, it can be a .xls, it can be a .xlsx, or a .xlsm. So you can select that file type from here. That means you'll be able to see the Excel files. If you want to see all the files that are in that folder, then you have a provision for that towards the end. That means you'll be able to see any file that is within that folder. But if you're very specific, you can choose. And it's not just SPSS. You also have a chance to work with stata file. You also have text file. So assuming I give you today some data set that are in stata format, or it was maybe entered in a stata software, you should be in a position to work with SPSS. So what I'm emphasizing here is you should also develop ability to understand different file formats. That is, if you're in this space of handling data, because data might come uh, from a different file format. So for tonight, okay, these are
Okay.
just night classes. So in the morning, we will go with the option of all files, and then we are seeing everything that is there. So let's opt for NSSR, and then open. So again, if you go back to Excel, you will notice that Excel works with different sheets, but in SPSS, it can only accommodate one worksheet. So with this data set that we're about to import, we also need to decide what we are going to analyze data in what worksheet. Okay, that's why you're seeing an option here, sheet. Like, now, of course, you understand Excel comes with worksheet, so you can choose dataset in what worksheet do you want to use it now in SPSS. Because there's no any other worksheet that has data, so we only have one. So just click OK, and now we should be having the dataset loaded into SPSS. So that is what I mentioned when we said, how do you handle secondary data in SPSS? And as you have seen, the process is very simple. You just need to know the location of your file and also the file format or the extension of your file. Is it a .xls, a .dta, or so forth? So the next thing is, now you need to make sure that you understand the variables. And we said there are two ways of coding a variable. You can either use the question number, or you can assign names to identify each of the variables. In this case, you can see we used question number. So when you see the first one as SN, it means serial number, because in the questionnaire, the first item was serial number. Yes, I said serial number is what we referred as metadata, and metadata are now the information that you don't necessarily need to code them during data entry process, especially if you have done the traditional approach. But now, if the client insists, there are those clients who say everything that we are going to collect down there in the field, let them come back. So even serial number. So if you look at this one, we had no choice but to also have serial number captured, even though you know very well you're not going to analyze the serial number. Okay, or maybe if you want, like the same way you mentioned yesterday that it's more of an identifier. Okay, that's why it's maybe useful to have it there as an identifier. So if you maybe want to trace back a certain observation, then I think that's when that serial number will come in handy. So I just want to concentrate more with question 3, because now the rest I'm sure you already familiar with, so you know how to go about section A. Section B, you should also be good to go. But now on mission and core values, which is now question 3A, and it has around 9 attributes. So if I go to my data, I will identify question 3A. There you go. And there are 9 of them. So I'll go all the way to question 3A9, which is here. So let's label it so that I know at least what variable represented what. As you can see at the label, I cannot even tell what was question 3A1, because if I don't have the questionnaire with me and maybe I'm a data manager, then I would not have proceeded and processed now this data. Of course, we said when handling data is not a one-person job. The person who will maybe do data entry might not come in as a data manager, and maybe the data manager might not be the analyst. So always again make sure there's a smooth transition in case there's now transfer of maybe functions. So the first attribute is distribution of NSSF offices. So I'll just be doing a lot of copy pasting. So I'll copy the entire attribute and then paste the label. On values, as you can see, it's a Likert scale. So the most positive person is always assigned the highest weight, and then the most negative person is assigned the lowest weight. But now I know you're used to conducting surveys, and at some point there are instances that during fieldwork you might decide to interchange the order of the response in a question that maybe it's more of a repetitive in nature. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I completely went off my power. My power dropped for a minute there.
No pressure. So I was just emphasizing on instances that you might be required to maybe at some point make very satisfied to have a value of 1. That is, I mean, in the questionnaire. And why do you do that? You see, there are those questions that maybe the responses are more or less the same, and they're so, like they follow each other. So instead of even someone reading what the question is all about, they will just be clicking on either strongly agree, because they just see how uh, organized it is, and it feels like it's an easy way of you maybe creating just observation without necessarily reading and understand what the question was all about. So if you do that, or in an event that maybe you have interchanged the order of the response in the questionnaire, always make sure now during data entry process you correct that. And the rule of thumb is the most positive person should always be assigned the highest weight, and then the most negative person will always be assigned the lowest weight. So I will now assign the values, whereby I'll say let the value of 1 denote someone who's very dissatisfied, and then I will add let the value of 2 represent now the someone who is just dissatisfied. Then 3 is neutral. Then 4 is satisfied. Then 5 is very satisfied. So for me, let me just take the first and the last just to identify the attributes. I don't necessarily need to label all the attributes that are there, so that we can move and do something else. So I'll just do question 3A1. I think I've been doing my thing. Should be here. Okay, so I just want to identify the margins. So I've just labeled question 3A1 and question 3A9 so that I'll know uh, the variable that I'll be working with. And then on values, we said you don't have to do everything for all the variables. So you know very well this is repetitive in nature. Like the way people are supposed to respond is the same for all the 9 attributes that are there. So I will just copy paste again. Okay, you confirm if you're good. Yes, you're okay there. Okay, so let me not even dwell so much with the preparation, but again, what you're seeing now is what we refer as now part of data management, preparing your data before you analyze. Okay, so if you are to analyze this entire document, then those are some of the things that you'll have to do for all the variables that are there. So what do I want to do now? Let's try and see how do we make sense out of such a question. And most people tend to just extract descriptive statistics because it's a categorical variable. So just say how many people in your data set were very satisfied, how many people maybe were dissatisfied, how many people were neutral. Yes, that is acceptable, but I don't think it provides the exact insight that maybe will inform on some of the decision, because if you just tell that maybe 900 people were very satisfied with distribution of NSSF offices, you have not exhausted that this variable. So what is my approach, or what am I proposing? So instead of just extracting descriptive analysis for such a question, I would prefer you look into scope, so that you can tell NSSF as an organization how are they performing in as far as mission and core values are concerned. It's more like a baseline, so that you say, okay, right now in as far as mission and core values, we are at neutral point. Then what can we do so that in a year's time we move from neutral to satisfied? Okay, and I'm sure this kind of conversation should make sense on your side.
Okay.
So let's create now something called score, and then now this score, what
Can you give me a minute? I try to upload this and see whether I can get to up this uploaded.
let me know once you're good to go, then we proceed.
Okay. Sure, thanks. Okay, got it. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so I've also tried to add more labels on my side, but I don't have to be lazy in the morning.
Okay.
So the idea here is you're saying, let me give an example, and then we will now do it practical. So I'm working under the assumption that, for instance, the first respondent gave